Hello and welcome to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. This week, our guest is the former executive editor of the New York Times, Jill Abramson. Now remember, we love taking your questions, so write into politicswarroom@gmail.com or send a tweet to @Politicon for next week's show. And we'll get to as many as we can, but don't forget to tell us where you're from. Please check out the links to our sponsors, Stellar Sleep, ExpressVPN, and Songfinch in our episode show notes. We thank you for supporting these sponsors because it really makes this podcast happen. So please tell your friends about us and remind them to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. James Carville, it's really a very pleasant morning in Washington, mid-50s, sun's out. Normally at this time for 40 years and 11 presidential primary or caucuses, I'd be in freezing, snowy Iowa to cover Democrats and Republicans crossing that state from Sioux City to Dubuque. I found towns that I really love to go to, like Grinnell, the birthplace of where Harry Hopkins went to college. But, you know, this year I'm not going out there. I know a lot of reporters are because it's the only game in town. There's only a Republican caucus, no Democratic caucus. I don't even think the Republican caucus matters that much. I guess that who finishes second matters. Trump will win. If DeSantis finishes third, he'll probably have to drop out. And it was easy for the Democrats to deep six the caucus because they screwed it up so badly last time. And I really don't have any idea, what's going to happen. I don't know how terribly important it is. So tell me I'm wrong.
I don't know. I don't know if I can tell you that you're wrong. The only thing I think I could easily be proved, because we're coming back after the Iowa caucuses, I think Trump may. I think it's probably win, yes, but I think he may underperform. And I base this only on this. I don't know anything about Iowa caucuses. We didn't even participate in them in 92. I know less about Republican caucus goers. But it does seem that the opposition, this Van der Plaats guy, apparently big deal, but religious, right kind of guy.
Evangelical.
It's going to be 0 degrees, and it just strikes me from a distance that the candidates other than Trump seem to be a little better organized in these Iowa caucuses, and I suspect that organization can help somewhat there. So based on not any polling or anything like that, but just kind of instinct, they might do not a little better. And as we know, New Hampshire don't count for much. It's going to count, but Haley could do very well there, and she get crushed in South Carolina because New Hampshire primary allows independence, South Carolina doesn't. But we'll see. I mean, at least it'll give us some actual voting results to talk about. That's all I can say. It'd be interesting because.
Well, confirming your suspicion, I hear from time to time to a good friend of our late dear friend Alan Barron, who was an Iowan, and he had encyclopedic knowledge. One of his friends stays in touch, and he says there's lots of rumblings of Democrats are going to actually go in the Republican caucus and vote for Haley in order to stop Trump. I don't know how big that is. Usually, it's anecdotally more impressive than it is substantively. But, we'll see. And I will say this. There are things I miss about Iowa. Two of my favorite people, Ann Selzer, one of the great pollsters in America, Michael Gartner, just, extraordinary journalist and writer and baseball owner and publisher and everything else. But the Iowa caucuses just seem like yesterday now.
I guess. But you got to say, these Republicans are putting a shitload of money in there and a shitload of sweat and effort and, going around. And, it's pretty cold up there right now. And
my God.
And, where they go, so go we. I guess we might find them boring, but they sure spend a lot of money down on the Republican side. And again, my experience with one party getting involved in the other party's primary or caucuses or anything else, pretty limited. I mean, you got to be pretty committed Democrat to say, I'm going to go with a bunch of Republicans because they're all kind of from the same area. I'm going to show up and vote for, caucus with Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis to stop.
Right.
I'm not buying that. I mean,
When you walk into that town center, that Elks Club, that school, in most of these places, a lot of people. So it's, I don't know. There's part of me that wishes I was out there because that's where it's happening, but I'm pretty comfortable right here in Washington. Hope to get to New Hampshire.
I was out there in 2000, Beechcraft or something, Cessna. It's pilot says, wings are starting to ice up and we're going to do this. And I might have to land. I go, Jesus Christ, what am I doing here?
Oh, man. And driving on those, I mean, it really is. There'll be huge banks of snow. And, but there are some really, really charming towns. As I say, I love Grinnell. And there are other places, but
charming towns in Arizona. They're not very charming in August.
Yeah,
and there's charming places in New Orleans. But sometimes, it's not. But at any rate.
Anyway, so let's turn to something that's really, really happening, and that's the House Republicans. James, they get loonier by the week, maybe by the day. Mike Johnson, now the speaker, who's hardly a beacon of moderation or really of much skill, accepted a budget compromise that you had to accept. It was basically negotiated before, necessary to avoid a government shutdown. And now the right wing, the real crazies are after him. They're accusing him of being soft, and they want to go after him. What they don't realize, of course, is there ain't anywhere near the votes to get what they want, not even close. They have a majority now of 2. So what's going to happen is Johnson's going to have to turn to Democrats. And the Democrats are going to say, fine, we're going to deliver for you. But if they move to vacate you, Mike, we ain't going to support you unless you give us a hell of a lot more than that. So I think that speakership is in some peril, and after only 2 or 3 months, James.
So I'm probably fashioned myself one of the most anti-Mike Johnson people that you can imagine. I've done YouTube videos, spoken out. I think the guy's young earth nuts. All consumed with anti-homosexuality has gotten in bed with some of the most horrific people you can imagine. Paul Pressler, Joe Aguilar, you name it. And I'll say all that. But they can't do much better.
Right.
It's just where it is. It's just math. It's just political gravity. And I don't think, and I used to say, somebody needs to go explain to the squad what math is, what the number 218 means. Apparently, that people have no idea what the number 218 means. I mean, it's really weird. But the guy, he doesn't have any breathing room. And then Scalise is going to be out for a month. I think they put a 2 or 1 seat majority now. I mean, Kevin McCarthy resigned just to screw him.
They got an Ohio congressman.
Everybody over there.
George Santos in New York 3 is gone.
Could you imagine if the Democrats were this disorganized, how crazy everybody would be going? Oh, God, we'd be like so critical. The press would be so critical. And it's like it's just part of the ether that they're completely dysfunctional, which they are, by the way. I don't know if I remember a congressional party in the House or the Senate being dysfunctional. You got a longer memory than I do of that stuff, but this is.
I agree, James. And let's not forget, for 4 years, Nancy Pelosi had basically the same working margin that McCarthy and Mike Johnson have. And no one said the place was in shambles. It was chaotic because of her skill, and she would go to the squad and say, "This is what votes. This is math. This is the votes we have." She was tough. She was smart. She was instinctive. None of which I think fit Mike Johnson.
And you got to give the squad some credit. I mean, they didn't like it, but they did go along. I mean, I would take our squadettes or whatever 20-1 over Paul Gosar and Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Oh, James, it's much bigger than that. Maybe 100-1.
Maybe 100. You're right. And I'm hardly a squad simp. but I mean, we got to have them. They're not nearly as bad as these crazy ass people are. And, you know, they have their views. I don't agree with a lot of them, but at the end of the day, give Speaker Pelosi some credit. But look, they're standing behind Leader Jeffers, and they did come along. However reluctantly, they were loyal Americans, and I'll give them credit for that.
Yeah, these guys are crazy. You know, there's another thing that maybe you can help me on. There's an impeachment craze up there. On Wednesday, Hunter Biden surprised the Comer and Jordan, the Bobbsey twins, of witch hunts at their committees when he showed up at a hearing that was going to hold him in contempt because he wouldn't testify in private. I didn't watch it, but from reading about it, he made the Comer and Jordan and others look like fools. What's her name? Nancy Mace and Marjorie Taylor Greene, you know, went into conniptions. It's just because the whole thing is so absurd. But the other thing that's happening is they're going to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas. Now, the last time, I didn't cover this, James, but the last time a cabinet member was impeached was William Belknap in 1876, and he wasn't convicted. Can you tell me, because I don't understand it, I really don't, I'm not a lawyer, what high crime or misdemeanor did Secretary Mayorkas commit?
Well, they got to do something. They got to distract their base. But I want to talk about the border a little bit, because I was at the program, and our friend Admiral Strivitas, who is the very definition of a non-full of shit person, okay? Mm-hmm. And he is not a right winger at all. There's no evidence that he's
none.
None. And he was asked, it was actually on Michael Sherkamish at a radio show. I've listened to it. It's on POTUS channel. And he said, and he asked, what do you think is the bigger issue? The Taiwan Strait, Ukraine, or the Middle East? And he said, actually, I think the southern border is. Now, he didn't follow up. But if Admiral Strivitas thinks that the southern border is, let's just say, maybe as big an issue as Taiwan, the Middle East, maybe it's time to listen. Maybe there's something there that we're not getting. And I'm very excited. Mary and I are going to speak to a border group that's like business people in February in El Paso. And I told the guys, I want to like see what's going on here, because I don't know. And I do know this. There's a lot of, we got to get Ruben Gallego on here. If you live in El Paso or you live in south of Tucson, you go back and forth the border all the time. You got relatives. It's like going from Washington, D.C. to Bethesda. All right. I mean, you got to show your passport, but there's a lot of stuff that we don't understand about this issue, but some of it is not good. And it's easy to just chalk it up to, you know, they exaggerate it. They're using this for political advantage. And I'm sure some of that is true. But when somebody like Admiral Strivitas says he's as worried about this as much as he is the Middle East, Ukraine, or Taiwan, it's time that somebody pay attention here. There's something going on down there.
James, I agree with you. And I think it's an issue that if it's the same 10 months from now, it's more than any other issue other than age. It'll cost Biden the election. You can't have the perception of an open border. And I don't know the details either. That I agree with. But to impeach a Homeland Security Secretary is just, I mean, that really is batty.
I think the problem is they got to do something. They can't do anything. They can't get the votes. They got to go to Leader Jeffers to get the votes. They even passed the budget that Johnson had to agree with. None of that is the most unproductive Congress I think in history. All right. So they got to go home with something. So I'll give you an easy vote. Let's impeach.
Exactly.
Okay. Then I go home and you can say, well, I did something. But I think the border might be the operable literature here. It might be the little boy that cried wolf. As if people kept crying wolf, it was this, and it was Hunter Biden, of course, and it was the Ukraine, it was something else. And they're just so full of shit. Just anything they said we, with good reason, dismissed it, but this might be the one time that there's an actual wolf there. And it's not helping. I don't see, I'm told we can't, the left, we should get a real border liberal, progressive, and get their side, because I don't quite understand it. But it's like, and now you see these stories about all the Chinese trying to leave China and coming in, and I'm sure a lot of them, I have nothing, I love Chinese people. They're fucking as hardworking as they can be, but all you got to do is slip a ring or two in there, and you got a major issue. So I don't know, but my New Year's resolution is I want to become more informed on border issues, and I want to attack it with a kind of open mind.
Well, that's a good one, and let's just commit. We're going to find that liberal, that border expert, whatever, in the next 3 or 4 weeks, and have him on the show.
Right, and but why? Let's ask Admiral Stavridis back on, because he's so freaking knowledgeable. Oh. It's so plugged in. But when he said that, and I said, I didn't just hear this, and I heard somebody making the same point. And why? What's his? If he's worried, I'm worried. All right.
No,
if Admiral Stavridis tells me it's Easter, I'm dyeing my eggs. I'm not even asking what day it is.
Right. No, right? I'm with you. Okay. James, the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, on late December, was operated on for prostate cancer. Never told anyone, or never went public. January 1, rushed to the hospital again, and for 4 days, they didn't say anything. The White House, the National Security Council, didn't know anything. I'm an admirer of Lloyd Austin, but this really is a serious dereliction of duty and creates a political problem for Joe Biden.
It's so from the Austin people, right? This is the best I can discern as their defense. Is that when he was in the Army, he was is the word I'm looking for, a taciturn, am I saying it right? Or kind of not emotional, straight on guy, didn't talk to the press, wasn't particularly anything. And if you're a 4-star general, you can do that. They're not going to tell you anything.
Right.
It's some people say it's true, some people say it's not. I want it to be true that sometimes Eisenhower would not salute back. And he said, I'm not in the Army anymore. And right. To understand, you're not in the Army, dude. You're a civilian. It's a different set of rules that you're operating under. And you can't do this. And what bothers me about this, it just confirms a suspicion that Biden doesn't know what's going on around.
Exactly.
If somebody goes on TV or goes on Fox and says, this guy's so goddamn clueless, his Secretary of Defense was out, he didn't know for 3 or 4 days. Yeah. Now, I don't know how many times the president had given event talks to the Secretary of Defense, but this is very damaging because it confirms an existing suspicion. And if I was Biden, I would have fired his ass right on the goddamn spot. But, he's famously loyal. That's his brand. I think Secretary Austin is a stunning soldier, got an unbelievable record. But I don't know who the fuck you think you are. You're not in the Army anymore. You're second in so much of decision making goes through the chain of command. I mean, it's actually when something the president, the Nichols-Goldwater Act, okay, way back in the 80s, but it's set up, and I think most people think it was a positive thing as to how orders are issued. And the Secretary of Defense is right under the president. He has to transmit the orders that the president gives him. He's not a minor fucking figure here.
No.
Right? It's not like the Secretary of Interior.
Particularly with a couple wars going on right now.
Right.
James.
I'm sorry. I thought this was a troubling story on many fronts, but the one I'm most familiar with on the political front, I thought it was particularly troubling. I really did.
Yeah, no, it is. And, even when he was a 4-star in the Army, he had a superior. And the idea that he would go and be really quite ill and absent and not tell his superior, I think even in the Army would be unacceptable. And it is most unacceptable in his current post.
If it's not, it should be. And
Right.
who's good on this is he's always good. I think is Josh Marshall at Talking Points, who's the only human being in America that agrees with me on Afghanistan.
I'm
But
sorry, that agrees with you on what, James?
on Afghanistan, I thought Biden could cost him. I thought he did the right thing. The whole way to get out is get the fuck out. And so, well, you can't, it'd be pointed out Obama wanted to get out, and the military kept saying, no, you got to wait. But I don't want to revisit the Afghanistan debate, but it's just interesting that I think he and I are only two people in America. I think that's one of the high points of the Biden administration. But at any rate, he had some good thoughts on the Lloyd Austin thing, which is troubling.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
Let me tell you, you cannot pick up the paper and look at a piece of current medical peer-reviewed Lancelot or Lancet or New England Journal of Medicine, I don't care what it is. They have come to realize that a good night's sleep is one of the more determinative things for good overall health. And I'm a big believer is you got to throw everything at it, from your sheets to medication to the ambient temperature to anything, because it not only determines the way you feel, apparently it has incredible consequences on long-term health. So I couldn't recommend this any highly, and the shit does help, and that's just a fact.
Yeah, because you hate it when you're lying in bed for what feels like an eternity, tossing, turning, desperately trying to find the ideal position, or playing word games, coming up with your finances or what your kids are going to do in order to get to sleep. We used to have that every night, which is why we're so glad this podcast is sponsored by Stellar Sleep. So if you have sleep problems, now big or small, you need to try Stellar Sleep. Stellar Sleep revolutionizes how chronic insomnia is treated, offering the first digital solution to all your sleep issues. What makes Stellar Sleep unique is how their focus on sleep psychology helps you tackle your insomnia at the source instead of short-term solutions like medication or cutting back on caffeine. Stellar Sleep was founded at Harvard by best friends who were both chronic insomnia sufferers and were frustrated by the lack of resources available to help their condition. Since sleep clinics often have waiting lists of 6 to 12 months, are expensive and time-consuming, they wanted to create something to benefit everyone. So many people relying on gimmicks or even just luck to get a good night's sleep. But using Stellar Sleep uses the latest science to give you the rest you need. After going through their behavioral therapy-based curriculum, it's been a total game changer for those people who use it. You save much time formerly wasting trying to fall asleep, and your wives are going to be a lot happier without you tossing and turning the night.
I could not agree more. I'll be honest with you, I really love Stellar Sleep. I mean, it's an indispensable part of my sleep toolbox.
Well, James, you ought to, because 80% of Stellar Sleep users significantly improve their sleep, falling asleep much quicker, staying asleep for 74 minutes longer. 74 minutes longer.
Ooh,
that's a big deal. As Joe would say, Joe Biden, a big effing deal. So if you have got stress, anxiety, or burnout, it's time to give Stellar Sleep a try. Learn how to sleep again with Stellar Sleep. Head to stellarsleep.com/war room for your free 7-day trial. And then it's just $99 a year. Plus, you can cancel anytime within the first 30 days for a full refund. Once again, that's stellarsleep.com/war room for your free 7-day trial, then just $99 per year. Now look for the link in our show notes.
So Al, 74 minutes is an hour and 14 minutes. Let's just call it an hour and a quarter. We'll just round up. All right.
Okay.
This morning, I had to, for complicated reasons, I had to get up at 7, and I looked at my cell phone because I tell the time, and it was 5:45. I went, oh shit! And the next thing I knew, the alarm went off. I cannot tell you the difference that hour and 15 minutes made in the way I feel today.
Oh, it's amazing.
I can't tell you. It's exponential. An hour and 15 minutes extra sleep is one of these things that it's so much bigger. You just extrapolate that times, 7 days a week, and you can do the freaking math. Okay, that's impressive.
It really is. It really is. So remember, stellar sleep. Hey, James, our guest and my former colleague and my dear friend, Jill Abramson, is versed in so many subjects. Today, we want to talk to the former executive editor of the New York Times, the only woman, by the way, to ever hold that powerful post, to discuss how the media should cover Donald Trump, and as a current Harvard professor, tell us about the intense debates about speech and governance at those elite universities. Let's start with Harvard. Jill, the firing of President Gay, she and her colleagues were eviscerated at a congressional hearing, giving legalistic answers on matters of anti-Semitism. Well, let me ask you first, was she treated fairly, and was it the plagiarism charge that really did her in?
I think, Al, that she was, in terms of how Harvard treated her, she was treated fairly. How she was treated in the arena of social media and intense news media coverage, I'm less sure. I think, that once after, she was obviously vulnerable from the moment that Harvard issued that first kind of namby-pamby statement about the Hamas attack in October. And that then was compounded, in a much more disastrous way by her congressional testimony with the two other college presidents. Would she have survived but for then the additional plagiarism allegations? I'm not sure, but those, I think, indeed did do her in. And also, the part of the anti-Claudine Gay campaign that stemmed from the plagiarism charges was, a very kind of well-funded campaign on the right by a group of people who have waged war against the quote-unquote DEI industry, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Claudine Gay's scalp is a very big one for that crowd.
And they're going after others too. What's the general reaction of students and faculty?
Students and faculty are upset. Especially members of the faculty who I know and talk to, they feel that unprincipled donors led by a hedge fund guy named Bill Ackman were able to pressure Harvard into getting rid of Claudine Gay after she's only on the job for 6 months. Obviously, that's, it's the Claudine Gay will go down as the William Henry Harrison of Harvard presidents anyway. Yeah, very, very short time in the position. And the faculty knew her well. She'd been the Dean of Arts and Sciences for years. So I think she enjoyed a fairly deep level of support. So the faculty is upset, and not all students. I mean, the student body has been very torn over the Hamas attack, and especially over the subsequent Israeli response to that, with so many Palestinians killed, that it's harder to gauge where the student body as a whole is. But it's a mess. It's a big mess and a huge embarrassment. You didn't ask about the very mysterious and powerful hidden element in all this, which is the Harvard Corporation, which is the governing board for the university. And I mean, they screwed up big time.
Will Penny Pritzker survive? The senior leader of that board, of that corporation?
You know, the politics of that board are I feel are beyond me. I mean, watching the story as a journalist, I would say no. Penny Pritzker was her champion on the corporation. She led the search for a new president after Larry Bacow announced he was leaving. So the picking of Claudine Gay was to be Penny Pritzker's triumph. And instead it blew up like an exploding cigar. And, anybody who watches, different governing groups closely would say, this has got to be, disastrous for her. But I just don't know how the inner workings of the Harvard Corporation happen, what their internal processes are. And, I have a couple of calls out to some people who I think have a much better read on things like me, someone like Bob Rubin, Al, who's a good friend of yours, should have a beat on it, but I haven't talked to him yet.
James.
So, Jill, I go back to Claudine Day. I dipped out in you mentioned Ackman. Outrage. Her testimony was at worst constipated. All right.
I think that's generous. That's generous.
Okay. At best, it was constipated. Of course, her lawyer was a Federalist Society lawyer. Never told me that she wasn't sandbagged, but it wasn't great, and she didn't have great answers. And Bill Ackman and everything is going crazy because, Harvard student body is got people that sympathize with the Palestinians. Okay, they just do. It's just part. If you look into Poland, it's not
true. It's true of most.
Absolutely. So Trump has dinner at his place with Nick Fuentes, who calls for the execution of all non-Christians. I think they want to shoot you. To be frank with you, Al and I probably get by, but you won't. But it's still insane. Why are they so obsessed? And of course, the MIT, and it came from them. They leap into. I looked at the plagiarism charge against the president of Harvard. It was kind of bad. Okay, it was
kind of sort of. It was very anodyne stuff. It's not like she was stealing original analysis.
But the stuff that guy's wife did, holy moly!
I know, much worse.
Right out to Wikipedia. I can see.
The other embarrassing thing involving Bill Ackman's wife that hasn't gotten the attention that I think it should is that she's an artist and she made some kind of elaborate gift for Jeffrey Epstein. So
I just think
he was apparently very close to Epstein.
Yeah, as was Larry Summers, who's another person involved early on in sandbagging Claudine Gay. Yeah, he's a former president of Harvard, and he didn't wait 2 seconds before he pronounced, that letter that Harvard issued, which was crazy bland and not well done. But Claudine Gay didn't need Larry Summers jumping all over her right away. And he is connected to Jeffrey Epstein.
So let's talk about the Washington Post, because for whatever reason, the Times seems to be doing pretty well financially, and it is what happened? How did the Post go so far down so fast? I mean, it was like shit. One day it was the Washington Post, and the next day they're just a screwed up entity. What's some key decision points that they made?
I would say the most obvious reason, and I wish I had original reporting on this myself, is that Bezos must have stopped writing blank checks. He, in the first years of his ownership, wrote checks so that Marty Barron could expand the staff. And it, turned out it was not so hard to return the Post to its glory times when its Washington coverage was, on a par with the Times, if not better. But I think, that he did not enjoy, and this is a problem with these, billionaire rescuers of American newspapers. They don't like to lose money. Yeah, they may be willing to see red ink for a couple of years, but not more than that. And I think Bezos has, closed the checkbook and maybe lost some interest in the Post. That's just my from a distance sense of it.
It looks like the Times, and I'm right back to out. They engage in other things to make money. Their cooking stuff does very well. Their travel section.
Can I just pause for a minute?
Sure.
Because as some of your viewers know, I was unceremoniously fired as executive editor of the Times in 2014. The cooking app was my baby.
Well,
it's
making them a part.
Money maker.
I use it. Okay, I literally, they're my go-to place. I mean, that stuff is good, but
it's fantastic.
They expanded. Give Jill Abe some credit. You think anybody's going to come by and give you credit for that? No. But I think that had a lot to do with why the Times is doing so much better. Is
games and cooking and other
crossword puzzles.
Yeah.
That's games. A crossword puzzle is under the games. But yeah, it's not only the crossword puzzle; it's Wordle, it's Spelling Bee.
Bill Clinton would do the Times crossword puzzle, and literally his pencil would not leave the paper.
Right.
And he had a coffee and a salad. And I watched him on the campaign plane. And he put the salad dressing in the coffee and the creamer on the salad and drank the coffee and ate the salad. And
that is fabulous.
And he was
there's a fantastic document.
And I said to somebody, watch this shit.
Yeah, he appears in this fantastic documentary about the Times crossword puzzle.
He could do that. That's not... That I've seen with my own two eyes. That's not some campaign spin.
Hey, James, let me just wrap up the Harvard thing, because then we're going to come to coverage of Trump and everything else. But Jill, I just want to know, why in the hell should private equity and hedge fund and corporate raider billionaires have major voices on university policies and leaders? It wasn't just Harvard, Penn, Mark Rowan and John Huntsman, both self-styled.
Mark Rowan inherited, from Leon Black, Apollo, which is really
but my point,
one of the more disgusting private equity firms.
And he gave $1 million to Donald Trump. John Huntsman served under him. How the hell can they be arbiters of morality and anti-bigotry?
I mean, there's only one answer, and it's, again, the checkbook. Money talks louder than ever at all of these institutions. It's a shame. It really is.
James, can we turn to Trump coverage?
Yeah. So, Jill, I've kind of teed up was the Marines column, and Margaret Sullivan wrote a piece in The Guardian.
Yeah.
If you were, how would you direct coverage of Trump if you were directing the New York Times today, or any news organization, AP, I don't care.
I mean, it's a tough one. You would think it shouldn't be, but he was, unfortunately, I think for the country and for us, he was president for 4 years. He's definitely the leading candidate today for the Republican nomination. It's a very serious possibility that he could be returned to the White House. So you can't ignore him, number one. Certainly in 2016, the press went overboard in covering every tweet and, putting all of his appearances on live cable news. But, you have to cover Donald Trump as an extremely serious contender for the White House. But that means also not letting him lead the kind of coverage that you do. And, I would say that the Times, I'm not just saying this because I spent a big part of my career there. I think that they are showing the rest of the press how to do it on most days, which is they are looking deeply at what a return to power for Donald Trump would mean for the country in substance, policy, and politics. And, they've run this amazing series in the past couple of weeks by Maggie Haberman, Jonathan Swan, and Charlie Savage, who is a less known entity because he isn't on TV as much, but he's a gem. And
I
again,
believe everything he writes, Jill. I just believe it if he writes it.
I'm going to sound obnoxious here because I credited myself with cooking, but Charlie Savage I found and hired, and he has done deeper reporting going back to George W. Bush's administration on the expansion of executive power than any journalist, I think, ever has. And it's brilliant, important work and more relevant now to Donald Trump than ever it has been. And they've been running this series about, Trump and his circle and their approach to power, which is that there are basically no limits to presidential power. And that they have shown how Trump, if he becomes president again, is going to run every aspect of policy out of the White House.
Well, I give them, I think that's been a fabulous series. My worry is this, and it's not so much the Times, everyone else. Fine, we do that in December, January, February, but then as the year goes on, we get caught up in what happened in six. I mean, CNN should have been billed for an in-kind contribution to Donald Trump because
in 2016.
Yes, they covered everything. But even recently,
Al, remember that Trump got $2 billion worth of free media coverage in 2016.
Yes. You and I had a mild disagreement on a story. I have contempt for Mark Halpern, the disgraced journalist. So he writes a piece. Trump is up in New Hampshire and he praises Putin and Viktor Orban. And the Washington Post leads with that. I think if Joe Biden went somewhere and praised, you picked the person, Xi Jinping and somebody else, I think that would be the lead. And the Trump cheerleaders say, no, you should have led with his economic message, which is really rather banal, and the crowds. So I think it's not just the great pieces that are done now, and they really were fabulous, but it's got to be continual. And it can't be done in an irresponsible way.
And it can't be done fast. That's the other thing. The news cycle moves so quickly now that there aren't many news organizations that can or are willing to invest the, reporter power you need to, get behind what's really going on.
Well, and I'll give you one example. If you look, this is not just the huge civil liberties issues that he raises and abuse of presidential power. After all, this is a guy who wanted to execute the former Joint Chiefs of Staff. But just look at some of his economic messages. He is going to extend the $3 trillion tax cut. He won't cut any entitlements. He's going to impose massive tariffs on most imports.
Right.
I mean, I think most economists from conservative to liberal would say that is a recipe for economic disaster, a recession, inflation. That's the kind of stuff that can be covered, can be quantified. You can talk to a range of people, and you ought to do it continuously, not to.
Yeah, I would not give the press a fantastic grade on that area of coverage.
I wouldn't either. James, will you weigh in? Because
I just make an observation about the three of us. All right. Hey, we've had some pretty interesting careers and done, different things. And I have come to the conclusion, and each of us learned, we got fact check boxes, we've got Glenn Kessler, we've got David Dale at the Times, does huge in-depth reporting. Atlantic writes an entire issue on the dangers of Trump. What really floored me was January 6th. I thought, well, shit, this is a bridge too far. People are going to be repulsed by this. And then I saw the January 6th committee, and I said, man, these people did a pretty good job. You got to give them credit. The video was good. The questions were good. The witnesses were good. The evidence was overwhelming. And more people than ever think it was a tourist visit. Nothing is moving anything. You hit these unbelievable stories, and it all breaks right in front of you, and nothing changes. And I don't know that I think they do a good job. I think Maggie and
right, but
it don't matter. It doesn't matter. Shit.
I know. I think the problem, James, is a familiar one, which is the Times, alas, is preaching to the converted. I mean, most of the Times is, large and very affluent readership and audience is, either on the East Coast or on the West Coast, highly educated liberal readership. They don't, they value, and, I'm not discounting the importance of what the Times reports, but the people who need to read this coverage are not reading it.
Well, I know, but Jill, they see the January 6th committee. Right? There's some idea they lived in an economy. I'm sorry, because everyday people live in an economy. Nothing moves.
I know.
It's so hard to confront this reality that the podcast, people, we talk to people, we feel like we connected, and don't make a shit. And I don't know if it's possible to even break out of this depressing, what I think is a doom loop we in. The Secretary of Defense story, we talked about it. This is not a good look. This is not a good look at all. But anyway, I'll turn it back to you, but I just, how much I respect you, and I think the insight that you give us, but I think at some point we got to admit we're all pretty not very effective.
Pretty powerless to change things. Yeah.
Right. It is.
Joe, let me go to our friend Maureen Dowd's column. 2 points. I think picking up on what we're talking about now, she made the point, the press has to do its job, but it's the job of the other side to make the case. Biden has not done that very effectively.
He's starting to, yes.
Gave a good speech, I thought, at Valley Forge. But that has to be, he's not the best communicator, but, that has to be joined. And I think she's right on that.
I do too.
The other point she alluded to, and I'm just curious, whether it's the papers or the networks or the individual reporters, Trump was a lucrative gig for them. I mean, they had more viewers, they had more readers, they had more clicks, and reporters got book contracts and TV contracts and everything. Is that an element at all in all this?
It is an important element in all of this, and at least for the New York Times, the crucial element is paid subscriptions. During Trump's first term, millions and millions of paid subscriptions were added to the Times. And that's the Times' bread and butter now, much more than advertising is reader revenue. And that Trump is, he's great for that. So, yeah, that's a factor. We'd be very naive to think it isn't. But I would also just like to pause and say, my friend Maureen Dowd is killing it. She is
Oh,
writing
really?
as strong a group of columns as ever she has, whether it's on Trump or, when it calls for it, like her column about Joe Biden not acknowledging Hunter's illegitimate child, was incredibly influential. And
Well,
she was right on that. And I just think, you have to take your hat off and tip the hat to someone who has been writing this political column and saying it like it is since 1992.
wow.
Pretty good. Pretty
And
good.
I'll tell you something. I've written a lot of columns, and some of them really bore me. I am never bored by Maureen Dowd. That's how good she is.
And she works hard, and she doesn't feel the love. I mean, it's you both know it's like mean out there. Most of the feedback you get is too horrible to even look at.
Well, I still harbor hope that you and Maureen and I can spend some time in New Hampshire next
Oh,
week.
that'd be a
Maybe I
blast.
think the thing was illustrative about the grandson. I don't know of anything weirder than Trump and Melania and Barron. Okay. I mean, come on. Maybe Maureen could turn a cannon in that
Should we
direction.
pause and do an RIP for Melania's mom, or skip it?
Well, I mean, I feel saying anybody lose their mother, unfortunately, we've all been through that.
Yeah.
I don't, and I think that she shouldn't have anything to do with him. My own personal thing is I think he stinks. I really do, and I think there's a lot of evidence. And that's my new obsession because it's working. We got to try.
Well, I'm hoping that you're right, James. Your theory, which I think is a brilliant one, is that maybe the best way to bring Trump down is to ridicule him. It's certainly worth a try.
Well, I think Marty Short really agrees with me. I talked to him last night. He's on the case, and he's going to supply some ideas. And we just can't sit there and, sometimes somebody's anonymous said a lot of things. Better to light one candle and curse the darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Jim. Go ahead, Alf.
Hey, Joe Abramson, you're every bit as good as that. No, you're better than advertised.
Absolutely.
And we learned so much from you about a whole range of subjects, and I thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I love your podcast. It's terrific.
And please give our best wishes to Dr. Griggs, who is the physician for our Sunday Zoom call.
The house doc.
The house doc, right.
I tell you, man, it's so important to use ExpressVPN. Big tech is right, because anything that you do, it all goes into some kind of algorithm. I can't tell you what it is, but like I've said this before, if I Google best hotels in Hawaii, all I get is messages from Hawaiian hotels, telling me about, special they got for $1,600 a night or some kind of bullshit like that. It really, it save you from a lot of stuff, could save you some major ass grief. It's a small, I call it investment, but it's a small investment in not being harassed, not being sold, not being just part of the giant bundling that goes on out there. And it's just the return on this investment is profound.
Absolutely. Because protecting yourself is why you need to start using ExpressVPN. Browsing without it is like walking your dog in public without a leash. Most of the time, you'll probably be fine. But what if your dog runs away or gets stolen? It's always better to be careful, especially when it's as simple as using ExpressVPN. Now, if you didn't know, every time you connect to an unencrypted network, as James said, cafes, hotels, airports, etc., your online data is not secure. Any hacker on the same network can gain access and steal your personal data. That's why ExpressVPN creates a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet so that they can't do that. It would take a hacker with a supercomputer over 1 billion years to get past ExpressVPN's encryption. ExpressVPN works on all your devices, your phone, laptop, tablet, and even on your smart TV. Plus, it's so easy to use. Just fire up the app and click one button to get protected. Now we feel so much more secure looking at products using our credit cards, tracking down all the information we need to create informed opinions, no matter where it takes us. These days, we wouldn't feel safe without ExpressVPN. We've got both our families using it, and you have kids, and it's such a good feeling knowing that it's protecting them too. So right now, get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN free at expressvpn.com/war room. That's expressvpn.com/war room. Again, expressvpn.com/war room. You can also find the link to internet safety in our show notes. You know, James, I have long had a soft spot for the Green Bay Packers, going back to Vince Lombardi, and then David Marinus' great book, When Pride Still Matters. It's a community-owned team. And I'm happy that Jordan Love, their current quarterback, is the only first-year quarterback to lead the team to the NFL playoffs. Even more, I hope he's a decent guy going back to the mold of Bart Starr. That shows you how old I am. But the Packers have had some great quarterbacks who are real assholes. The most recent was Aaron Rodgers, vaccine denier, who recently suggested that the late night show host, Jimmy Fallon, might be on the tapes of the infamous sexual predator, Jeffrey Epstein. Of course he wasn't. And then before that, there was Brett Favre, who most recently was embroiled in a scam in Mississippi where money meant for welfare recipients was instead doled out as political favors, including $5 million to build a volleyball court at Favre's alma mater. So I wish Mr. Love a lot of success, make a lot of money, and please be a good citizen.
So my best defense of these two guys is they're concussed. I think they've both been hit in the head too many times because it's impossible to arrive at that level of stupidity on your own.
Yeah.
So my outrage is if you were to take a formula that said over many years and times the assholeness times the number of times wrong, the leader by far, no question about it, would be the Wall Street Journal editorial page. They're massive assholes. They are literally never right, and they're very annoying. How many times editorials they do is, who killed Vince Foster? Okay, that gives you some idea. And for the longest time, they have been saying that, global warming is nothing. It's just variations. It's El Nino. It's a liberal boutique issue. And you hear a lot of these kind of centrist, kind of left of center assholes, and who profess to be for the common man. And we don't need to focus on global warming. We need to focus on gas prices and price of eggs and everything else. Then I read a story a few days ago in the Wall Street Journal, actually in the journal, about how high insurance rates are and how it's been driven by hurricanes and wildfires. I don't have to tell you this is directly limited to climate change. And I'm still listening to this shit in where I am, but where everybody is. It's not just if you live on the Gulf or you live on the Atlantic where you can't afford it. It's getting like that because of wildfires, tornadoes, flooding all over the country. The jump in home insurance and auto insurance is profound and is deep. And let me tell you why it affects ordinary Americans, because if you have a mortgage, you have to have insurance. You don't have a choice. If you don't pay cash for your car and you have a car loan, you have to have collision insurance. They'll take it away from you. And these rates are up like 25%. Now, I'm sure that some of these insurance companies are, using it to jack up the price a little bit, but they're experiencing record loss. And this is hitting ordinary Americans right in the pocketbook. This is as much of a tax increase as Trump's 10% tariff would be a tax increase on everybody. And, I'm sick of these kind of centrist assholes. And I agree with them on some stuff. I certainly agree with them that this kind of coded language is not worth the shit. But the idea that this is some boutique issue that a bunch of college professors give a shit about and doesn't affect ordinary American is literally insane. It's breaking ordinary Americans. You're being broke. It's a bigger explosion in expenses than anything that you can imagine. Don't look at it this way. And I'm going to start being openly critical of these climate dickweeds, because this is not something that's off in the future. This is something immediate. This is having significant drag on Americans' incomes. It's going to have a significant drag on GDP. And by the way, I don't get credit for this, but something most people don't realize is right now, we're producing more domestic oil and gas than any time in history. Which is all. And it's the screw global warming. We're going to lose the election. We won't get gas price down. So let's put all money in all the petroleum out of strategic petroleum reserve. Let's give every drilling permit we have. Okay, we've done that. And what you're saving at the gas pump compared to what the additional cost of insurance, I got news for you. You're behind. This is not a boutique issue. It's an everyday issue, and it's kicking Americans in the groin every day.
Agreed.
Al, very good piece, but I finally found somebody more culturally clueless than me, and that would be you. It actually wasn't Jimmy Fallon. It was Jimmy Kimmel. I don't know how I knew that, but...
James, could you pick him out in the line?
I don't think I could. I might get confused. But at any rate, please stay around, because I'll always be the second most culturally clueless person in the United States.
It's a close contest. I never had that problem with David Letterman and Jay Leno.
There you go. It was a different era. That's all I could say. Think about this. All right, so Valentine's Day is coming up. So you go and you go, oh shit, so you go to CVS or Walgreens or Costco or wherever you can go, all right? And you pick up a box of chocolates shaped like a heart, and you give them to your wife, you give them to your daughters, and, oh, thanks, honey, thanks, Dad. And they'll go back 2 weeks later, and a stupid box of chocolates is still there. It says nothing. It just says you had a thought about them as you were going through that. This is like personalized. It's different. They can save it. They can listen to it over and over again. And it's an expression that these people are something special in your lives. And you can, not just Valentine's Day, birthdays, anything that's coming up, you can do this. I tell you what would be good, like some of the old Marines, get special songs on the Marine Corps birthday. Or if you're into 4th of July, whatever your kind of passion is, or dates or things you want to mark. Songfinch can do anything, and it gives you something that is really hard to have in it, that it's something personal, something special to the recipient of what you did. You're not going to find that at Walgreens. You're not going to find that at Kroger's. You're not going to find that at Sam's Club, anywhere else.
Well, and it's, something, James, if you really use Songfinch, it's better than flowers or chocolates. It really is.
Yeah. I mean, how many roses can you get?
Right. And how long do they last? This is a song, but how long do chocolates last? Right. It's my wife. They last about an hour.
So like one of they said, Johnny Carson a long time ago said one of the funniest things ever. He said, there's not but one fruitcake every Christmas. and everybody gives it to everybody else. It's just bad. That's the same fruitcake around. Well, it doesn't do you. The thing about Songfinch, it's very personal to the person, so you can't.
Right.
Well, all right, the Hunts. Hey, honey, the Hunt sent us a fruitcake. Uh-oh, we got to give the whites a Christmas gift. Well, just take the card and switch it, and who gives a shit? The one Christmas fruitcake.
You get an unforgettable memory. Songfinch is the ultimate gift to show how much you care. You get an original studio quality song inspired by your story. I mean, it's completely unique, personal, and lasting forever. Now, I gave it to my wife, Judy, for our anniversary, and she's sometimes not wild about some of my presents. This one she loved. It captured how I felt better than I could say it, and beautifully told the story of how we met. The look she has when she listens to it was really, really priceless. I mean, James, 1 out of 20 gifts is not bad, but this is the one that struck the chord.
And unlike the fruitcake, it's not going to go bad.
Exactly. And we're not going to give it to anybody else. Special add-ons can help to commemorate the occasion even more. There's a vinyl record of your song, one-of-a-kind art based on your lyrics, or adding your song to streaming services so you can surprise your unsuspected recipient. Songfinch is the only original music platform that guarantees you'll love your song or they'll work with you until you do. They stand behind every original song their community of talented artists creates, over 300,000 of them. So put your heart on the line with a studio quality song unique to your relationship. It only takes 4 to 7 days, and the song lasts forever.
See, if I had to sing a song, that'd pay me a lot not to sing. I have a voice that sounds like goose farts.
Well, my wife one time asked me to stop singing in church. So I identify that, but we won't pick you or me. We'll pick somebody good to sing that. And for a limited time, Songfinch is letting our listeners upload their song on Spotify for free, so you can listen to your new favorite song anywhere you go. So go to songfinch.com/war room and start your song. After you purchase, you'll be prompted to add Spotify streaming for your original song for free. That's a $50 value. The offer is only available for our listeners at my special URL, songfinch.com/war room. That's songfinch.com/war room. Songfinch.com/war room. Don't wait. Get started now. You can find the link also in our show notes.
Songfinch is the perfect gift for Valentine's Day or any other holidays or any day special, or maybe you just do it because you love somebody, you care somebody, you want to give them a message that's a little different. So I would go with Songfinch 9 out of 10 times.
All right, James, now for our questions, and they are good as always from the listeners. David in Salt Lake City, Utah says, what do you think will be the impact on 2024 if Trump should be acquitted in one of those early trials? No one seems to discuss this possibility. What would the White House and Democrats do then?
Well, first of all, before I answer the question, I want to say something. Salt Lake City is one of my favorite places to go. I think some people say, oh, it's like a bunch of Mormons. Not really. They're very nice people, but the airport there, the whole place, fabulous. The food scene there, those Utah mountains are stunning. I can't say enough. And actually, I like going to Temple Square. I mean, certainly don't. The whole history of what's the name, Fawn Brody. I read up books about a lot of books on history. History is fascinating place. And by the way, I think it's Democratic mayor. I think they had a gay Democrat for mayor. So just people get this.
My niece is a ski instructor out there. Not a bad job.
No, it's not a bad job. What was the question?
The question was impact on 24 if Trump should be acquitted in one of these.
Yeah, so the question is the impact if Trump's. I think it'd be pretty profound. And I think the impact would be, it would really rally his people, and it would really kind of demoralize Democrats. I think the question is spot on, and I don't think it's a minor issue. I mean, is it going to cause huge shifts, but you don't need huge shifts now.
Yeah.
But I think it would have a suppressing effect on Democratic enthusiasm and would increase Republican enthusiasm. Yes.
I agree. David in Miami says, are there enough open primaries for independents and Democrats to help Nikki Haley with her quest for the nomination? The answer, David, no. There will be in New Hampshire in 2 weeks where you can go and independents are a much larger block than Democrats or Republicans. They can vote in either primary. You can re-register if you're a Democrat. That's unique. Once they once you go past New Hampshire and you start South Carolina, most of those states have closed primaries. Only Republicans. That helps Trump.
Agree 100%. Next question.
Yeah. John in Gurnee, Illinois says Jim Clyburn helped Biden win South Carolina. Rep. Clyburn is now co-chair of President Biden's reelect campaign. Do you think that'll help with black voters in 2024?
Look, I like Representative Clyburn. I think he's had a remarkable life. I think he's had a remarkable career. I think he is, if anybody can take credit for beating Donald Trump in 2020, he would be one of the top 3 on anybody's list. And I don't think it's going to matter much. Because I'm of the view, just so you know, and I've talked about this before, I don't think anything matters right now. I've just become so, and I look at the black numbers and they're horrific. And honestly, Joe Biden has been the best president black America's ever had, period. I include Obama in that. I include President Clinton in that. Maybe Lyndon Johnson. All right, if you just took from where you were when he started and where you were when he finished, you'd have to say it's pretty profound. But in terms of job numbers, in terms of appointments, in terms of just who he is, I couldn't imagine anybody being better for black America than Joe Biden. And it's just not showing up. I'm sorry. And I don't think the appointment of anybody to the campaign, for a black woman Supreme Court justice, I mean, the cabinet, the Secretary of Defense, the UN ambassador, I mean, it just, again, it ain't moving a needle. And I don't know that. I'm not very confident something will.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're right, James. I really am. Jim in Babcock Ranch, Florida says, I detect hesitance on your part for having the Supreme Court, based on the 14th Amendment, disqualify Trump from running for president. January 6th, Jim says, cross the line. Isn't it past time for American leaders to lead? Jim, I hate my answer on this. I really do. I apologize ahead of time. But I think the substantive case for disqualifying him from the ballot is really powerful. You know, people like Michael Luttig, one of the most respected conservative jurists, have persuaded me of that. However, I think it would be a mistake. It would be a mistake not because there's not a great case. He did lead an insurrection against the government of the United States by trying to overturn an election. But I think the political fallout would be humongous. I think there would be violence. I think it would raise questions that would just linger for decades, if not longer.
You know, Al, I agree with your answer, but the more that I can't tell you, it's like a 225-page opinion or something like that. I can't tell you I read all 225, but I read some of it and I read a lot about it. The case was actually brought by 2 conservative law professors, I think. And I got to tell you, the rationale in that Colorado Supreme Court, I mean, they anticipated every argument. They had factual findings. I mean, they went to a shitload of trouble, and they did this off the top of their head. I mean, I agree. This is my prediction. I think the Supreme Court will say you can't do this. I don't. Sometimes the Supreme Court does stuff that's not rooted in law, that's rooted in politics. Okay, I know that. My backdoor prop bet is one of the 3 liberals votes to keep him on, and let's take the Chief Justice out, and one of the 5 conservative votes to keep him off. And that's an easy, if I care about the image of the court. I'm trying to do something to say, oh, we actually read the law. We actually read the briefs and we care about it. And this is a gimme. So Kagan goes to Gorsuch and says, look, this thing is going to happen. Let's just switch this. And if you don't think that shit goes on, then
Of course it does.
you ain't watching the world. But that's my off the wall prediction. You get two votes that go in an unpredictable way to try to save their ass because that reputation is justifiably, ethically, legally, politically, anything you can think of. They're in a toilet right now, and they got to try to crawl out. And you hear them, you got Barrett, whining about it. You got Kagan whining about it. They're not as big a deal as they used to be, and they know it.
James, I agree with you. That internal stuff happens all the time. I think another thing, and this may be the most important thing that comes out of this, if they do keep him on the ballot, which they're likely to do, whether it's 7-2, 6-3, or 9-0, I don't know. I think it makes it really, really almost impossible or incredibly hard to go along with him on his incredulous immunity prosecution. I think it makes it much harder for some of those conservatives, not Alito and Thomas, they don't care. But I think that decision is more likely to be a 6-3 or 7-2 against Trump.
I agree. And this gives them the politics of this just line up. And
Right. James, you're not going to like this question. I'm going to tell you ahead of time. It comes from Robin in Covington, Louisiana.
Oh, my God.
And she said, should those of us, or I don't know if it's a he or she, I apologize, it can be either one with Robin. It's a great name. Should those of us in Louisiana committed to stopping Trump organize to win our state in the 24 election or volunteer at phone bank or canvas in a place? Explain your answer so I can convince others.
Okay, well, first of all, Covington is in St. Tammany Parish. It's kind of across north of the lake from New Orleans. Very, very nice town. There's some very, very good restaurants there. Very good. I ate one of my girlfriends at LSU was from Covington. She lived on South Drive. I actually was through there not long ago and went and looked at the house. It's been 50 years ago, maybe. No, but we're not going to carry it. If we carry Louisiana, then shit, we get 400 electoral vote. But
maybe more.
Maybe more. But there's some things you can get list. You can, volunteer to make calls in Georgia, which does matter. It's going to matter profoundly. You can do bulk. You can, write small checks. You can do stuff online. But we're not going to, I think we're wasting time here. I hate to be a downer, but we're not going to carry Louisiana. And I thank you for your question and your passion and your intensity, but we got to direct it somewhere else.
Yeah, I agree. Dale in St. Paul, Minnesota says, and I'm sure he's talking about the State of the Union in February, should Joe Biden confront Marjorie Taylor Greene when she heckles him this time? When has playing nice ever changed anyone's position? Dale, I don't subscribe to the Michelle Obama, when they go low, we go high. I think, we got to go low from some of this stuff. But, the President of the United States does not want to get in the gutter with Marjorie Taylor Greene or Mac Getz. Other people can do it, but he basically ought to just ignore them because they are not people who, as I say, you want to get in the gutter with.
I tentatively agree with you, but I don't know what I'd give if he just looked at it and says, who told you to say that? Your gym instructor?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you're right, but not overwhelmingly right. I think one kind of line like that, or some Democrat yelled back at her,
Yeah.
Matt,
did you learn that?
Words in your mouth?
Right. Matt, did you learn that from those underage girls? No, that probably wouldn't work.
Right. There's a big part of me says you got to get in the. I had a pig when I was in the 4-H club, and we were. I slop pig. I'd take care of the pig, So I know something about slopping pigs. I know something about pig pens, and we were loading the pig up to go to. We wanted to parish fair in Plaquemine. We're going to Shreveport, loading him up in the thing to take him to Shreveport, and he broke his leg. We had to eat the goddamn thing. But so I have some experience with pigs, and sometimes you got to get in the slop with them. And I don't, it's probably not the time to do it, but I wouldn't be disappointed if we did. I wish a Democratic congressman, what else besides words is your gym instructor putting in your mouth?
Moving on, Mark in Benton, Iowa says to you, James, could you at least try to couch your complaints about Biden? Can you run down some of his key accomplishments we all should know about?
Delightedly, that the lowest unemployment rate in over 50 years. All right, a really good job so far on Ukraine. Has handled stuff in the Middle East about as well as he can. Has any number of highly competent appointments in his administration, very diverse. I think his Supreme Court appointment is one of the great Supreme Court appointments in American history. I think his basic decency as a human being shines through sometimes, like everybody else. He's got faults. I totally admire the way that he stands by his son, brings him to state dinners, does things like that. I think his plan is turned to green energy is the greatest magnificent leap we've had in a direction that is a threat to the entire world. So I'm a huge admirer of President Biden's, both personally.
You would add infrastructure, I'm sure.
What I add, so we've been talking about infrastructure since fucking 60s. Since I talk about Eisenhower built the interstate highway system, and America just can't do big things anymore. We're doing big things now, really big things. My complaint is not with President Biden in terms of his accomplishments and in terms of anything else. I just think politically, but I didn't win this fight, so I'm totally in it and totally trying to do whatever I can to help save this country and win this freaking election. But do not ever confuse my skepticism with President Biden's polling numbers and his age with my respect for what he's done and what he's accomplished as president. Because and I understand why you would feel that way. I think to some extent that's my fault, but I've been clear enough about it. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to clean that up.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I would just agree with James and say that right now, I don't think there has ever been a first-term president with the kind of accomplishments that Joe Biden has. I mean, you could go back to, maybe FDR. I suppose that would have to be an exception given the situation. But other than that, it's hard to think of any first-term president who's even come close.
If you remember, we slipped back into a recession in 1936.
Right.
I mean, I agree with the stuff he put in place. I don't, but that's pretty big praise since at least Franklin Roosevelt's first term. I'd take that for anybody. It's pretty amazing.
You sure would. All right, keep those questions coming in. If we didn't get to them this week, we'll get to them next week because you really are, it's just terrific. I feel so good about our audience when I get those questions because you are so smart. And I love it when you challenge us.
I do too, and they give me a chance to clean up stuff that I wouldn't normally have a chance to do. So, and I appreciate the question.
Thanks for listening to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I am Al Hunt. Don't forget to send your questions for us by email to politicswarroom@gmail.com or tweet them for next week's show at Politicon. Now, following this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you'd check out the links to our sponsors, Stellar Sleep, ExpressVPN, and Songfinch in our episode show notes. We thank you for supporting them because when you do, it helps make this podcast happen. To keep up with us, subscribe to Politics War Room on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You also can find other shows you might enjoy on the Politicon YouTube channel or when you search Politicon on your favorite podcast sites. Remember, please rate the show with a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with another show as we continue our War Room planning.